Jaqual's Story Part 1, The Temple of Remembering. August 3, 2014. Where we left off. Jaqual speaks. I feel a pull on my body as I stand before the first threshold to the Temple of Remembering. I have been instructed that as I cross each threshold and stand in the hallway before the next doorway, I will experience different lessons and challenges. These lessons and challenges need to be cleared and balanced before I can proceed to the next threshold. I will continue with my story in our next meeting. Remember to call me into your daily life. Jaqual. Sue's note: I doubt that I remembered to call him every day, except when I was writing his story, which I cannot find. Jaqual speaks. July 24, 1997. The first doorway is very close to your color red. As I cross the threshold, I am flooded with the memory of my parents. I have not thought of them in many years. I see the brilliant violet eyes of my mother and the deep green of my father's. I feel their dedication to me and know that they have studied for many years in order to give me a body. I am just awakening to my third-dimensional form. Everything is very red and orange, and I am hearing the singing of my mother and the laughter of my father. I feel safe and totally surrounded by love. I can still remember the formless world from which I have just emerged. I miss the feeling of being one with everyone and everything, but I still feel safe because I am one with my parents. Now my memory moves forward to the time when I am about 4. I have been in a hard-shelled body, the word we use for our third-dimensional form because our other forms are far more fluid, and have reached about 6 feet of height. On Antares, we are independent of our parents at 3 years of age, and gain our full adult bodies by the time we are 7 years old. I now live in one of the communal homes with the other children. There are certain adults who run these homes, but we are free to go anywhere in our community and spend time with anyone that we please. My mother is an artist and spends much of her time on the 4th and 5th dimension but visits me often. My father comes to see me about once a year. He is a priest in one of our temples assisting others to enter the Temple of Remembering. Suddenly, I feel my first experience of fear because I am remembering the attack of the Draconians on our small community. I was in the garden of my parents' home visiting with my mother. She loved to visit with me there and was constantly educating me about the many beautiful flowers that grow on our planet. Mother's dear friend, Alicia, had just left the garden to bring us some aberomium tea when we heard a horrible scream coming from the house. Mother and I raced in to see what was wrong and found Alicia on the floor in a pool of blood. 2 huge draconian reptilian men stood over her. Mother ran to her friend's side and one of the draconians grabbed her by her hair and pulled her up to meet his eyes. I could not think or plan. I reflexively ran to my mother's aid. I was much smaller than the draconian warrior, and he laughed as I beat upon him to release my mother. I will never forget the laughter as the 2 men observed a small boy trying to rescue his mother. Finally, the warrior became tired of his game and used my mother's body to bat me away from him like a small insect. The other warrior then picked me up and threw me out of the window and into the garden. I will never understand why they did not come out to finish me off. Perhaps they thought I was dead. I'm sure that I must have looked dead. Both my legs and one of my arms were broken. The left side of my face was bashed in, and I was covered with blood. I still have the scars over my left eye. When I regained consciousness, I do not know how much later, everything was quiet and still. I dragged my body into the house with my one good arm and found my mother dead beside her friend. I can't bear to think what they did to her. It was then that I swore I would be a warrior for as long as it took to seek revenge and find peace. I know that I cannot cross this first threshold of blood red before I release my need for revenge. Only then will I find my inner peace. Perhaps, Suziel, you and I can seek that together. Sue's note: I could not continue with this journey until the summer of 2002, which I managed to misplace. I will need to seek Jaqual's guidance before I continue with this story. Sue speaks. August 1, 2014. Dear Jaqual, I am calling to you within my now of August 3, 2014, which is 17 years after your July 24, 1997 message. I understand that we also connected in the summer of 2002, but I do not remember and cannot find my writings of that message. I remember taking dictation for what you were telling me while I was on a camping trip. Therefore, I wrote it by hand. I have the beginnings and the ending. Now I need the middle of your story, but I cannot find the middle. I imagine that I will find what I received in one of my many written journals. However, I believe that there are no mistakes or accidents, so I call on you in this now to tell the middle of your journey. Perhaps there is an alternate reality that has occurred during the time we did not communicate. I know that when I found the ending of your story I did not remember writing any of it. Maybe it is just that I am in an alternate reality in which I can now hear your story from a higher frequency perspective. I am quite adept at typing higher dimensional channels now, so my fingers are on the keyboard awaiting your reply. I will go into meditation now to best calibrate my consciousness to you, my higher dimensional spiritual warrior. Jaqual speaks. Greetings Suziel, I rejoice that you are prepared to return to my story. And, yes, you definitely resonate to a higher frequency perspective than you did before. In fact, I have put out a homing beam for you, which you could not perceive before this era of your incarnation. Before, you enjoyed my story but found it quite disturbing. I wish you to know while we were not communicating, I did move through all the thresholds and doorways. Hence, I too resonate to a higher perspective. I will tell you my story as it was revealed to me as I crossed each threshold. In this manner I can reveal what occurred and how I was able to transmute each problem into a lesson, and each failure into a victory. Before I continue, I wish to tell you about our Temple of Remembering. As I have said, before we can enter the temple, we must go through a series of 7 doorways with each one resonating to a higher frequency. Before we can enter the doorway, we must cross the threshold and walk the hallway before the door. What we did not know until we entered the 7th doorway was that a long stairway awaited us. Each series of threshold, hallway, and door is of a higher frequency, which emanates the next highest frequency color, vibration, and tone. In this manner, each doorway represents a different era of our incarnation. In order to pass through each frequency of doorway, we are called upon to transmute every lower dimensional experience of that era of our incarnation. In this manner, we live an intimate life review through which we can transmute our fearful third-dimensional memories, thoughts, emotions, and actions of each successive era of our life into fifth-dimensional unconditional love. Via the power of your unconditional love, we can transmute back to our true form of light body. The first doorway is red and represents our early childhood. The second doorway is orange and represents our coming of age. The third doorway is yellow and represents our duty as a spiritual warrior. The fourth doorway is green and represents our time mating and parenting. The fifth doorway is blue and represents our transition from parent to leader. The sixth doorway is indigo and represents the awakening of our higher perceptions. The seventh doorway is violet and represents our transmutations back into light body. I will now tell you of my journey through the Temple of Remembering. As I crossed the first threshold, and stood in the hallway before the red door, I felt revenge fill my being. This frequency of revenge gave me the courage to face the most frightening thing warriors could ever confront, their own unconscious fears. I was a small child again, and all that I had known had been lost. I was ready to release my life and visit my loved ones in the higher dimensions. As I allowed my weak spirit to flow from my mortally wounded form, I saw my father, who had died protecting the temple, and mother there to greet me. "Our dearest son," they said in one voice, as they were now merged into the one form of their divine complements. "You will not find our people here because they have been taken away to be used as slaves. Only you and those of us who are off-planet are left. You must contact the others so that they can follow the Dracs before it is too late to follow the trail to where they have taken our people." But how can I do that? I asked. My body is mortally wounded, I cannot walk and only have one good arm. Come into our essence, spoke my father. Our joint love will heal your wounds. I then experienced myself floating between my parents who held my wounded form in an upright position as they embraced me from the front and back. It was then that I realized that I was in the fifth dimension with my ascended parents. Since I was the only one left alive in our community, I was the only hope for our people. Therefore, my parents had been granted a decree to heal my physical form with their united, fifth-dimensional light body. I then realized that I, too, was in a state of light body. Gradually, my physical body returned to its pre-wounded state, but my spirit was filled with revenge. This method of using one's light body to heal their physical body was one of the main things my father had been working on in his temple. He could sense my revenge, but knew that I might need it if I were to succeed. The Draconians had destroyed all of our communication systems and available ships. However, my father told me of a prototype ship that was hidden underground by the temple. Using that ship I could call our warriors who were off-planet to join me as I followed the trail of the Draconians. I hate to admit it, but it was so wonderful in the fifth dimension that I almost wanted to stay there with my family and friends. With that thought, all those who had died to the physical appeared around me to engulf me in their multidimensional light. Slowly, my wounded spirit was healed, and I found myself returned to my healed physical form. To my surprise, my form had been progressed to my adult size, but my mind and emotions were still that of a child. I knew that I should have gone directly to the hidden ship, but as I walked from my parents' house to the temple, I knew I had to tend to the dead. Therefore, I rushed back to the house to get my father's laser gun, which he hid there for my mother's safety. Then, as I walked through our settlement toward the temple, I blessed and vaporized each body. I knew that they had all returned to the fifth dimension, so I held no sorrow for them, but I could not allow their physical forms to slowly deteriorate in the Ontarian sun. The ship was exactly where my father had said. We were trained from early childhood how to operate even the most sophisticated starship, so I thought I would know exactly how to operate it. First I removed the holographic camouflage from the entrance of the cavern. Then I raised the ship to the surface and sent out a message to all of our warriors telling them what had occurred. I understood why my parents had restored me to an adult form, because my smaller body would have had difficulty reaching all the controls while seated in the pilot's chair. Since this ship was a prototype with different controls, my father merged his fifth-dimensional consciousness with my physical form so that he could kinesthetically instruct me. I can only stay with you for a few moments of your time, as my body is returning to the higher dimensions. Therefore, pay close attention to what I am doing and telling you. No one else knows how to fly this ship and I will only be able to show you once. You must put aside all grief and revenge, as these emotions will lower your consciousness and you will not be able to remain in connection with me. Do you understand me, son? Father, I understand, but how can I release this pain inside of me? You must be a true spiritual warrior and think only of the greater good, he replied. I realized then that I could not allow my emotions to affect my thoughts. This knowing gave me the strength to focus only on my father's voice, which I heard inside my heart. I then felt my mother, who was one with my father now, and realized that death is only a third-dimensional illusion. My duty and honor was to rescue the living members of our settlement. With the alignment of my heart and mind, my consciousness shifted into the fifth dimension, and my father was able to actually enter my form within his now to instruct me kinetically on all the operations of the ship. Soon, I knew everything about the ship, thanked my parents, and took off on my mission to save our people. With my childhood over, I moved toward the orange threshold. Channeled by Suzanne Lee. SuzanneLeePhD.blogspot.com